What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party. You know what we're doing here? We're repping America, the center, and common sense. And California, which is where I live. But more on that later. Let's kick this baby off. You know, when the left doesn't like something, they label it as a MAGA talking point. And that certainly applies to Zoran Mandambi. You know, people who don't even live in New York look at this and go, you know, this guy is a flat-out socialist. And even more troubling is he's just a far-left liberal, which means he's going to proceed with his plans despite evidence to the contrary. And that's kind of the theme today is evidence. You know, we see evidence of things, and the politicians just ignore it. You know, Mandami is promising to end homeless sweeps in New York City, and he's going to prioritize housing accessibility. Well, it's one of the most expensive real estate places in the world, New York City. Where does it say in the Constitution or the laws that people have the right to live in New York City? That if they want to live in New York City, they should be allowed to live in New York City, despite their finances or inability to even pay rent. The problem with this is that all the evidence leading up until he takes over is that the sweeps work. It gives you an opportunity to get some of these people into housing. Look, I know. I went through rehab. I've been involved with rehab and drug addiction counseling, things like that. I've talked to countless people who have worked at different agencies, homeless agencies, outreach programs, things like that. And at best, you're going to save, maybe, 30 to 40%, right? 60 to 70%. So in other words, 6 to 7 out of 10 people on the streets, you're not going to be able to save them. They're just going to constantly come in, go out, come in, go out. I look at what happened in New York recently. A lady who was hearing voices telling her that she had to kill people was released from a mental facility, purchased a knife at Macy's, and stabbed a woman who was changing her baby's diaper. This catch and release doesn't work. We know this. But the sweeps work for two reasons. One, like I said, you can now get in contact with these people and maybe get them into housing, maybe fix their lives. Or at the very least, you can move encampments from where they're a problem to where they're less of a problem, or maybe not even a problem. But one of the solutions in New York City is not to just keep moving them around the city. They need to be moved out. They need to be moved more to the outskirts, where they're not attacking tourists, where they're not affecting people's ability to run their businesses. But he's going to ignore that evidence because he knows better. See, that's the problem I have with the politicians on both sides, okay? But the left is the one that's showing it the most right now. That despite evidence to the contrary, they think they're right. It's just dumb. All right, next thing. So, there's been a lot of talk about how the U.S. Navy boarded a Venezuelan, a ship off the Venezuelan coast. They're trying to spin it. But the truth of the matter is that this ship was part of a ghost fleet. What's going on is that we have sanctions against places like Iran and Russia, right? We say you can't sell your oil unless you stop your bad behavior. In the case of Russia, you can't sell your oil until you pull out of Ukraine. Well, what they do is they put it on one of these ghost ships. And these ghost ships use spoofing technology to use other people's transponders. All the ships have to have a transponder so you can track them. I don't know if you've ever used like Flight Tracker. It's an app that you put on your phone and it'll tell you what plane just flew by. Well, that's because of a transponder. These people were picking up oil in Iran and transporting it to various places, and then went over to Venezuela, all the while flying a Guyana flag, which they were not registered as a Guyanan ship, but they fly the flag, they send out fake transponders, and basically they just smuggle embargoed oil. So instead of going to war, we put sanctions on Russia, okay, or Iran. They get around these sanctions by using these ghost fleets. Well, we're stepping up. We're stepping up enforcement. We're trying to save the world as usual. We did it recently in coming off the coast of coming into Israel, where they found guns from China smuggled by Iranians on a ghost ship. And they boarded it and seized the weapons. Now, the Democrats want to make this into an issue that Donald Trump is exceeding his authority. But what Donald Trump really is doing what we could have been doing for the last 4 years, which is clamping down on these ghost fleets, not allowing people to get around sanctions. What is the purpose of sanctions if we just allow people to go around them? Yeah, something to think about, right? I mean, again, it's Trump actually doing something, trying to make a meaningful change in the world. Look, if Russia can't sell their oil and their natural gas, they're going to start running out of money. Pure and simple. And that's the kind of political pressure we could put on our enemies to get them to comply with what the world has said is the behavior we'd like to see out of them. Anyhow. So, World Cup coming soon to North America, Central America, Mexico. And they decided that one of the games being played in Seattle, since it was going to coincide with a big Pride event, they were going to have the game be, themed around Pride. I'm fine with that. At first I thought, well, we don't really need, here in the United States, we really don't need to highlight Pride quite as much. I mean, I think it's becoming more and more acceptable. You see churches, you see conservatives accepting gay people for who they are. But the World Cup is the World Cup, and there are still a lot of nations that frown or even punish people for being gay. Well, 2 of those teams are slated to play this Pride event, Iran and Egypt. And Egypt, who has already lodged a complaint with FIFA, soon to be followed, I'm sure, by Iran, states that a Pride event flies in the face of their religion. Which brings me back to the question I've been asking for, a year or two now. Why are the liberals siding so heavily with the Muslim population? In Egypt, it's frowned upon. The police can arrest you on different charges, not necessarily homosexuality, but public indecency, things like that. In Iran, it's just illegal. So, ironically, out of all the teams that could have been playing in this Pride event, it ends up being Iran and Egypt. And again, it comes back to another point where people like to criticize the United States and say we're the worst place to be. Israel would be, I've seen people ask, where is it not safe to be gay in the Middle East? And they answer Israel. Well, we need to look at these things. Both of these people are doing it under their religious laws. So we now have a conflict. Whose rights do we, enforce? As sad as it is, Iran and Egypt have all the legal right in the world to believe what they want to believe. And if their religion tells them that being gay is wrong, well, you sort of have to honor that. At the same time, it's kind of ridiculous. All right. I think the game's up on that. Just accept people for who they are. But Iran and Egypt are not going to do that. It's going to be interesting to see how this proceeds. I think there will be a lot of violence within this game from supporters and, people just out looking to make trouble. It'll be real. I have a feeling that some of the people involved with the Pride event are going to, I think they're going to overstep. And I think it's going to lead to conflicts, fights, assaults, possibly even death. So I don't really know what the solution is. I would just move the teams, to be honest with you. I would just figure out to reschedule it. But maybe this is one of those wake-up calls where people start to see, hey, these are the people we're kind of backing with this whole pro-Palestinian movement. And they don't really like the same people we like, so maybe we shouldn't be on their side. Because whether they want to admit it or not, the left is being used by Muslim Islamic extremists. They are. They're molded to believe that pro-Palestine is something they need to get behind while ignoring all the other red flags, ignoring the evidence. The evidence is that people in those countries, not necessarily that religion, but especially those countries, frown upon the LGBT community. So why are you supporting them? Why do we have Queers for Palestine? That doesn't make sense. If Palestine was its own country, it's at least 50-50 that they would outlaw homosexuality. Because Iran and Egypt do. Egypt is far more moderate than Iran, but even there, they frown upon it. All right, this is letter P week. So I've been saving this, but this is interesting. And this was something that this article really validates what I had long thought. You know, when I was growing up, peanut allergies was sort of just it was kind of a unicorn, you know, or I don't know a real good comparison, but let's just say it's a unicorn. All right, it was known to exist, but it really, you know, you didn't really worry about having peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at school. You didn't worry about having peanuts on a plane, peanuts at a ball game. Wasn't a big thing. Then in the late 90s, early 2000s, it just exploded. And part of the reason is that at that time, the government, the Food and Drug Administration, people like that, were urging parents to not expose their kids to these allergens, particularly peanuts, until the kids were at least 3 years old. But in 2015, a blockbuster paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, known as the LEAP, Learning Early About Peanut Allergy study, found that introducing the food to babies when they were just a few months old could reduce their risk of developing the allergy by over 80%. So that makes me think that, maybe they didn't know what they were talking about. Yeah. And the evidence seems to hold up because, since 2017, peanut allergy diagnosis among children has dropped by 40%. An attending physician, he works at Children's Hospital Philadelphia, Dr. Stanislaus Gabrielski. Wow, that's a mouthful. He had this to say: a common misconception about food allergies is that delaying the introduction of allergenic foods may help prevent them. We now have strong evidence showing the opposite, and introducing peanuts and other common allergies early in infancy can actually reduce the risk of developing an anaphylactic food allergy. Wow. That's pretty impressive. In other words, kids won't go into anaphylactic shock over peanuts. Well, this just goes to show one of the things that people from my generation and generations around me sort of have been fearing. That was not well said, was it? So it's almost like I had a stroke right there. When we grew up, we often roamed the neighborhood looking for fun, dangerous things to do. Car surfing, jumping onto the back of trains, things like that. We had a lot of bumps and bruises. Our bones grew to be like just super strong. I've never broken a bone in my body, probably because of all the lead paint I ate. Now, I understand that there's dangers to those things, but we didn't have things like food allergies. We exposed ourselves to all kinds of contagions when we were kids, digging in the mud, drinking out of random hoses, eating weird things, daring our friends to eat dog biscuits. That was my generation. We were rough and tumble. And now we see this softening of kids where they're being steered away from anything that'll strengthen their bones, strengthen their muscles, strengthen their mental resolve, really. And peanuts, I think, is a really good poster child for that. We became fearful of these peanut allergies, and our fear only made the allergies grow worse. I think we need to return to more of a rough and tumble. Certainly less screen time would help. I'm not saying that like the internet and phones and all that are bad. It's not black and white world here at Purple. We see things in gray because that's what they really are. But parents, I see it even with myself. I'm going to get into that a little bit more, but, my daughter recently got married. She's 20, he's 21. They go out, and I worry all the time. And they're going to a town that I grew up in. But I've seen the changes. We're going to get more to that in just a sec. A lot of us, myself included, knew that when Biden threw open the borders over the last 4 years and terrorists, scammers, fraudsters, just bad actors came streaming across the border, that this was going to happen. Pure chaos. And now the Trump administration has to clean up the mess. And, just like life, before the calm comes chaos. And now the Democrats can vilify Trump for the chaos. And it's the chaos that they fueled. They're the ones who started it. They knew exactly what they were doing, right? They poured gasoline on the house, and as Biden left office, he flicked the match at it. And now they blame Trump for the burning building. So over 10,000 illegal immigrants, including murderers, kidnappers, sexual predators, have been arrested in LA since June, despite the anti-ICE riots. And these riots, were people assaulting law enforcement, throwing rocks, throwing Molotov cocktails, fireworks were launched at them, doing whatever they could, flattening tires, towing vehicles, trying their best to protect illegal immigrants. Because that's who you're protecting. I understand that ICE has been heavy-handed, but the truth of the matter is ICE wouldn't even have to be here if we just turned over illegal immigrants who have committed a crime. That is bizarre to me, that if you arrest somebody for a DUI and they are an illegal alien, you will let them walk out of your jail and just return to life, even though we have the option to turn them over to ICE and have them deported. Now, a lot of these people are going to come back again, but we will catch them again. But when you fight against ICE, what do you think they're going to do? This is completely, I don't care how you want to contextualize it or how other people want to contextualize it on mainstream media. What is going on with ICE right now is chaotic, but it is only chaotic because of the Biden administration letting so many people in and states and cities declaring themselves sanctuaries. What the F are people really accepting this? How about a sanctuary city where a mom and her child could shop without being afraid of being stabbed or robbed? I've seen that in the very neighborhood that I live right now, where for over 15 years, we didn't even have a blip in terms of crime. And recently, just in the last year, we've had our catalytic converters stolen, our neighbor's catalytic converters stolen, our neighbor had mail stolen from them, and nobody does anything about it. Everybody's stretched thin, everybody has excuses, and nobody investigates. And when they do catch these people, they have a catch and release policy. We have politicians and judges who are out there trying to figure out how to let criminals back on the streets. That is not a MAGA Republican talking point. That is simply what is going on. That is it. That is it. Let's look at a few, just for S and giggles here, right? Let's look at a couple. They highlighted 4 people who were arrested during this. Actually, I believe it's 5 people. All right? 5 different people who were arrested in these ICE raids in LA. You got this guy, Mohammed Checheniani, who is a criminal illegal alien from Kenya, who was convicted of facilitating interstate commerce in aid of a racketeering enterprise, larceny, and stolen property. So he was moving goods for some sort of criminal enterprise, whether here or in Kenya. I believe it was here. Also arrested was a guy from Cuba. He had a long criminal history that included convictions for sex offenses against a child, sex offender registration violations, harassment, cocaine possession, and robbery. Gee, we really want him to stay, don't we? Another guy, Iranian. So far, by the way, no Mexicans. Okay? Because that's the narrative, that ICE is only going after one group of people. Hey, look, I have a lot of sympathy for the Mexican-American community. I admire them for all that they have done here and their contributions and that even just the way they look at life. I love it. I have no problem with them coming here. But when you're a criminal, you're a criminal. So this Iranian guy, he had convictions for rape, aggravated assault, domestic violence, burglary, and a DUI. But don't turn him over to ICE because we want to keep him here in America? Why? Why? Because we count him in the census so California could build power off of having more people? Great. One Mexican national who was picked up, convictions of homicide, conspiracy to commit homicide, and multiple counts of attempted murder. Another illegal from Mexico was removed from the United States 5 times and has convictions for robbery and aggravated sexual assault of a child. Isn't that great? Down in San Diego, they're pissed off about the sanctuary policies because an illegal migrant was released and ran over, a hit and run, ran over an 11-year-old, killed him the day before Thanksgiving. Gee, that's who we want in the country. I understand. There's plenty of American citizens who drive drunk and kill children. I get that. Lock them up, okay? But when you're an illegal alien, lock them up and deport them. Turn them over to ICE. Then they won't have to come to your city looking for them. You know, in Congress right now, that Jamar, whatever the fuck her name is, one of them squad members, has backed the Dignity Bill that's going to strip ICE of detention powers, erase immigration enforcement. Yeah, isn't that great? They want to pass a law so they can inspect ICE and stand in their way from deporting illegal aliens. Okay? This isn't about protecting American citizens. It's protecting people who aren't supposed to be here. Mandami, the first meeting of the Immigration Justice Committee, one of 17 groups the mayor-elect has assembled to advise his transition to City Hall, is expected to take place at the end of the week. And it will work to, quote, develop the best path forward for upholding and strengthening our sanctuary policies. So one of his first actions is figuring out how to protect illegal immigrants who commit crime and are then turned over to ICE. Here's another one coming out of New York. This is from Representative Claudia Tenney. She represents the northern part of New York. She's criticizing Letitia James, the Attorney General, for failing to honor ICE detainers for 7,000 criminal illegal immigrants. As she said, this is a sanctuary state. As you know, still a sanctuary state run by the Democrats completely. Even the governor faces a veto-proof majority in the legislature. And now we'll end up having a pro-sanctuary mayor come the 1st of January. There are almost 7,000 people with advanced criminal records, like murder, homicide, rape, extortion, you name it, just about every crime, child sex crimes, that are let into our state every single year. You serve your time, they put you back in the state instead of deporting you. These people are working feverishly to protect illegal aliens. Right now, Letitia James is prosecuting Tenney's hometown sheriff for cooperating with the 287 program that authorizes law enforcement to serve immigration warrants on illegal immigrants already in custody. As Tenney says, my district is upstate New York. New York 24. My entire northern border is the Canadian border. And we have had almost 90% of the people on the foreign terror watch list under Joe Biden come across the northern border. So it's a very dangerous place and an easy place with safe haven. You are broadcasting to the criminals of the world, come to our city, come to our state, we'll protect you. Oh, that is ignoring the evidence. You want to know how clueless You want to know how clueless these people are? Newsom was on a podcast, and he called homelessness and poverty poster child of California's failure as a state. He went on to describe housing and affordability crisis as original sin in his state. Holy crap. Holy crap. These Democrats in California literally create a problem and then cry about it. I mean, I cannot, it's just unbelievable how out of touch these people are. But of course, he says, Newsom announced a multi-billion-dollar plan to tackle homelessness crisis in his state. in May, which included a push for cities to take action. Okay, then take action, Gavin. If the cities won't do it, then you do it. You figure out a way to do it. He shared a model ordinance for cities and counties to immediately address dangerous and unhealthy encampments and connect people experiencing homelessness with shelter and services. And then he had the balls to say this: there's nothing compassionate about letting people die in the streets. Really? You want to talk to LA? Because LA Board of Supervisors passed a law saying they weren't going to comply with you, Gavin. How about that? How about that? While the Democrats are running around creating sanctuary cities, including Gavin Newsom's party and including Gavin Newsom's people, cities are now forming anti-Gavin Newsom homelessness laws. Oh my God. Do they not see what they're doing? Allowing people to live on the streets as they're doing right now serves nobody. And it certainly doesn't serve the people who live here. In that article, a commenter, Rock Ingersoll, said, how much money has Newsom pocketed from the high-speed train that was never built? The homelessness initiatives that cost billions but only increase the homeless population. The billions spent for water infrastructure projects that were never built. The millions spent on a new 911 system that was never built. The billions that disappeared from the unemployment department, EDD, during COVID. Right. Exactly it. While you're allowing people to just scam the government and government programs, you're going to bellyache about homelessness being the original sin. You're the one. He wants to blame NIMBYism, not in my backyard. He wants to blame that. And he says it's economics 101, supply and demand. It's not very complicated. Well, okay. Your heaps of fees and regulations aren't helping. Over $100,000 before you $100,000 before you even start building a house, which is then added onto the sales price. In some states, you could buy a house for less than California's fees to even begin building. That's part of it right there. That is part of the problem. You make it so expensive to even build a house. It's your door, man. You're the one who opened the door to all these problems. You're the one who refuses to close the door on all these problems. You're the one, Gavin, who doesn't look at the evidence and go, okay, this is broken. Allowing these radical activist permit people to try to dictate where and how we build our buildings is part of the problem. We should inspect properties that are being built to make sure that they are being built safely, both in the construction and then in when people are living there. They need to be safe. Okay, cool. I get that. But all the other red tape, all of the things, I mean, look at the Palisades. They're not issuing as many permits as they need to because they have activists in those offices who don't want people building on the coast. On the coastline should be for nature. Great. I couldn't agree more, but that's where people want to build, so let them build there. It's just, And then when people have finally had enough, they start speaking up. There's this guy, Brian Deegan. He's a motocross star and founder of Metal Militia. And he's supporting Chad Bianco, a Republican for California governor. People used to come to California to try to build their businesses and chase that dream. And now people are moving out of California to chase that same dream. Fair enough. Fair enough. I know somebody. I worked with somebody who did exactly that. And now they have a house. They have their family. They're building their life in Arizona. Proud of him. You know, like he said, he points out what I was just talking about. Deegan said that besides what he described as rampant overregulation, one of the things that he's found most alarming is the decline in safety in California neighborhoods because laws are not being enforced. Quote, a lot of places that I've lived in California have really gone the wrong way. And he's also upset about the way that Newsom shut the state down during the pandemic, but then he went out and did whatever he wanted to do. As Deegan says, now we look back on it kind of going, man, what happened? Newsom was way overbearing while he's out partying, still living the high life, while everyone's on lockdown. I always kind of wonder how guys that are in power, such as Newsom, like, how do they even get into power? Because they don't represent the common people that really are the majority of California. There's been so much damage done, but it's going to take somebody that understands the law, that's not going to bend, has good family values, that could get the state back on track. I mean, you have everything here. And I feel like we have just let it go as far as how it's been run. And I think the majority of people in California want it back. I know I want it back. I'm getting older. I'm looking at possibly having to retire to a different state because of all of the ways they try to take our money. And one of the worst parts about this is that so much money is being scammed and stolen through fraud that they need more money and more money and more money. Now we have Katie Porter coming in and she wants to raise taxes. The problem that I have with all of that is before you raise taxes, can you get your checkbook in order? Could you please get your checkbook in order? Figure out where you're wasting money. Figure out where the money's being stolen. Figure out where the money is just flat out being wasted. Start with the fucking bullet train, because that's a waste of money. That's never, ever going to be profitable. It's never going to be the best solution to get up to San Francisco. It's so far off course, and it's just ripe with people using California's red tape to make millions of dollars. So this Deegan interview was done by Fox News. And when Fox News reached out to Newsom, they got a one-word response from Newsom's spokesperson. And that one-word response was, who? Isn't that lovely? How do you think Gavin Newsom's office feels about you? How do you think Tim Walz's or Mandami or any of these fucked up politicians around the country? How do you think they feel about you? They've got their supermajority. They've got their rich, their young, their educated but stupid people who are going to vote for them. Look what happened with Prop 50 here in California. It was to gerrymander, but they had enough votes. Now they're gerrymandering. They're gerrymandering the state so they can keep power. They've already got a majority. They've got the judges on their side. They've got the state legislature on their side. They know that they're going to remain in power, and they can ignore a majority of the population. That's just the way it is. That's what they're operating on. And then they have the audacity to send their little sycophant acolytes out there to protest no kings. What the hell do you think Gavin Newsom is? He is a king. He does what he wants. He orders us around. And in reality, he faces no repercussions. More people need to become like me, king slayers. Let's go after them. If it's a Republican, I'll join your fight. I'll go after them. In my state where I live under an emperor, a king. And I am sick of it. And a lot of people are growing sick of it. Reassess the way you look, especially the left. Look at what they've done. Where does the evidence lead you? Their ideas are not working. Kingslayer, King Copious, I'm out. Purple State Party, so are you. Love one another. Keep on grinding. I'm proud of you all. And you know, I got another concert tonight. I'm going to relieve that stress by dancing it out.